My name is Eiana, and I was 25 years old when I stood alone in the rain at my father's funeral, watching my stepmother whisper to her son while they shared an umbrella 20 feet away. 3 days later, I walked out of the lawyer's office with nothing but a faded photograph and a suitcase I'd have to collect from the attic. They called me a disgrace as they threw garbage bags filled with my belongings onto the lawn. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that my father had left me something they couldn't see, something that would change everything. 3 years. That's how long it took for them to come back, desperate and begging, asking me to sign papers that would save them from losing it all. The irony? They still had no idea what I'd built in the shadows, or that the house they thought they owned had never legally been theirs to begin with. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment below telling me where you're from, and make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories. The rain fell like accusations that afternoon at the cemetery, cold, relentless, soaking through my black dress as I stood alone before my father's grave. Around me, umbrellas bloomed like dark flowers, shielding everyone else from the storm. No one offered to share theirs with me. My stepmother, Vivian, stood 20 feet away, surrounded by relatives I barely recognized. Her perfectly styled hair didn't have a single strand out of place, protected by an oversized black umbrella held by my stepbrother, Derek. She caught my eye for just a moment, leaned toward Derek, and whispered something. He smirked. As the service ended and people began to drift away, Vivian approached me. Her heels clicked against the wet stone path. She stopped just close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume cutting through the scent of rain and fresh earth. "You've embarrassed him enough," she said softly, her voice like silk wrapped around razor wire. "Don't show your face again." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that my father loved me, that I was his daughter, that she had no right. But the words caught in my throat, tangled with grief and shock. I just stood there, watching her walk away, her umbrella bobbing through the crowd until it disappeared. 3 days later, I sat in Mr. Peterson's office for the reading of the will. The leather chair felt too big for me, like I was a child again, feet dangling above the floor. Vivian sat across from me, perfectly composed in a navy suit. Derek lounged beside her, scrolling through his phone. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and began reading. My father's assets were substantial: the house, the investments, the land. With each line, I waited to hear my name, and waited, and waited. "To my wife Vivian, I leave the estate and all properties therein." My heart sank. "To my son Derek, I leave my business holdings." I gripped the armrest. "And to my daughter Eiana?" Here it was, finally. "I leave one suitcase containing personal effects currently stored in the attic, and this photograph." Mr. Peterson slid a faded photo across the desk. It showed my father's estate from years ago, back when my mother was still alive, back when it was home. "That's it?" I whispered. Vivian didn't even look at me. "Your father was very clear about the consequences of reckless behavior and debt, Eiana. You made your choices." "What debt? What are you talking about?" "The credit cards he paid off for you? The car accident? Those were from when I was 19. He said he'd help me. He said a lot of things," Derek interrupted, finally looking up from his phone. "Doesn't mean you get to drain the family fortune." I looked at Mr. Peterson, desperate. "Is this legal? Can she just—" "I'm afraid your father's will is quite clear, Miss Whitmore. These were his wishes." But they weren't. I knew they weren't. My father had promised me. He'd held my hand just months before his diagnosis and said, "No matter what happens, you'll always have a home." I left the office with nothing but a photo and directions to collect my suitcase. Derek was waiting for me when I arrived at the house that evening. My house, the house where I'd grown up, where my mother had planted roses, where my father taught me to ride a bike on the circular driveway. "You can't be serious," I said as he blocked the doorway. "Mom doesn't want you here. Get your stuff and go." "I need to get my things from my room, my books, my already packed." He gestured to the porch, where 3 garbage bags sat in a heap. "There you go. Don't let the gate hit you on the way out." "Derek, please, can I just—" He picked up the bags and threw them onto the lawn. They split open, spilling my clothes, my journals, my life across the wet grass. "Dad's gone," he said, his voice sharp with finality. "This is Mom's home now." I gathered what I could, shoving soggy clothes back into torn bags, my hands shaking with rage and humiliation. A car passed on the street, slowing down to watch. Perfect. The neighbors would have something to talk about. By the time I made it to my car, a 10-year-old sedan that barely ran, rain had started again. I sat in the driver's seat, surrounded by trash bags, and let myself cry. The next 6 months were a blur of survival. I found a studio apartment in the worst part of town, where the walls were thin and the heat barely worked. I took a job at Bernie's Diner, working the night shift because it paid an extra dollar an hour. Every night, I served coffee and pancakes to people who'd probably never wondered where their next meal would come from. I smiled until my face hurt. I ignored the handsy customers and the impossible orders and the way my feet screamed in protest after 8-hour shifts. Some nights, usually around 3 a.m. when the diner was empty except for one or two insomniacs, I'd think about my father. I'd remember things he'd said, little moments I'd taken for granted. One memory kept surfacing. I was maybe 12, sitting on the porch of the estate while my father tended to his garden. Vivian had just moved in with Derek, and things were already tense. Eiana, he'd said, kneeling beside a bed of irises, if they ever turn on you, remember, the land listens only to my blood. I hadn't understood what he meant then. I thought he was being poetic, talking about legacy and family roots. Now, scrubbing grease off diner plates at 4 in the morning, I wondered if he'd been trying to tell me something. The email came on a Tuesday in February. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. Subject: Estate of James Whitmore, secondary documentation. The sender was H. Hillard, attorney at law, not Mr. Peterson, someone new. Dear Ms. Whitmore, I represent certain interests related to your late father's estate. I have discovered documentation that may be of significant importance to you. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to arrange a meeting. My hands trembled as I typed a response. 2 days later, I sat across from Mr. Hillard in his modest office. He was older than Mr. Peterson, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put me at ease. Your father, he began, was a careful man. He came to me about 5 years ago, shortly after he married Vivian. Why didn't he use Mr. Peterson? Because he wanted certain arrangements to remain private. Mr. Hillard opened a file folder. Are you aware of the guest house on the eastern portion of the estate? I nodded. The old cottage? My mother used it as an art studio? Your father placed that structure, and the half-acre it sits on, in a separate trust. A trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The room tilted. What? It's modest, Miss Whitmore. The building needs work. But it's legally yours? Has been since your mother passed. Your father wanted to ensure you always had something that couldn't be taken away. I couldn't breathe. Does Vivian know? The filing was done privately. Unless she specifically searched for alternative trusts under your name, she'd have no reason to know it existed. Can I see it? Mr. Hillard smiled. It's your property, Miss Whitmore. You can do whatever you'd like. The guest house looked smaller than I remembered. The white paint had grayed and peeled. Weeds choked the small porch. Windows were cracked. But it was mine. I used the key Mr. Hillard had given me and pushed open the door. Inside, dust covered everything. My mother's old easel still stood in the corner, cobwebs connecting it to the ceiling. The wooden floors were scratched but solid. 2 small rooms, a tiny bathroom, a kitchenette. It smelled like abandonment and memory. I walked to the window and looked out at the overgrown garden, the line of trees that separated this plot from the main estate. In the distance, I could just see the roof of my father's house. Vivian's house now. Something shifted inside me. Not quite hope, not quite rage. Something colder and more patient. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of every corner, every flaw, every possibility. That night, sitting on the sagging porch steps as the sun set, I made a promise to myself and to the ghost of my father. I'll rebuild, I whispered to the empty air. Brick by brick, they'll remember who they erased. And then, softer still, 3 years. They'll regret every one. I sold my car the next week. It hurt. That car had been freedom. But I needed capital more than I needed convenience. I could take the bus to work. The money went toward materials. I watched YouTube videos on basic construction, on plumbing, on electrical work. I bought secondhand tools and learned to use them. My hands, soft from years of easy living, blistered and bled and eventually hardened. Every spare moment, I worked on the guest house. I ripped out water-damaged drywall. I sanded floors on my hands and knees. I painted walls at midnight, falling asleep with a brush in my hand. It was during one of these late night sessions that I met Leo. I was on the roof, trying to figure out why it leaked every time it rained, when a voice called up from below. That's a patch job. You need to replace the whole section. I nearly fell off in surprise. A man stood in my overgrown yard, hands in his pockets, looking up at me with a concerned expression. Who are you? I called down. Your neighbor, sort of. I'm renovating the Miller place down the road. Leo Chen. He gestured to the roof. That's going to keep leaking until you replace those shingles. Want some help? I should have said no. I didn't know this man, but something in his earnest expression made me trust him. I can't pay you. Did I ask for money? And that's how Leo became part of my rebuilding. He'd show up on weekends with proper tools and patient instructions. He taught me the difference between load-bearing walls and partition walls. He showed me how to read building plans. Why are you helping me? I asked one Saturday afternoon. We were installing new windows, and the late spring sun was warm on our faces. Leo was quiet for a moment. My mom was kicked out by her second husband when I was 10. We lived in a shelter for a year. He tightened a screw. Someone helped us then. I'm just passing it forward. I didn't tell him my whole story. Not yet. But I felt seen in a way I hadn't in months. By fall, the guest house was transformed. The floors gleamed with new finish. The walls were painted a soft cream. I'd furnished it simply but tastefully with thrift store finds that I'd restored. The small garden had been weeded and replanted. Leo suggested I rent it out. You've created something special here, he said, standing back to admire our work. People would pay good money to stay somewhere this charming. The idea seemed impossible, but I created a listing on a vacation rental site under a business name, not my own. I took careful photographs that highlighted the rustic, charm, and peaceful setting. The first booking came within a week, then another, and another. The reviews were glowing. Hidden gem. Peaceful retreat? Better than a hotel. Money started coming in. Not a lot at first, but steady. I reinvested every penny. I improved the landscaping. I added outdoor furniture. I created a small fire pit area. A travel blogger featured it on Instagram. Suddenly, I was booked months in advance. I quit the diner. With the rental income, I started looking at the land around my property. Vivian had sold off portions of the estate over the years to cover Derek's failed business ventures and her expensive lifestyle. Those plots were now on the market again, the buyers having defaulted or moved on. I bought them back, one by one, quietly, through the trust, using different paperwork. Each purchase was small enough not to draw attention, but together they added up. Within 18 months, I owned 5 acres surrounding the guest house. I hired contractors to build 2 more cottages, each as charming as the first. My little rental became a boutique compound. A developer reached out, offering to buy everything for twice what I'd invested. I took the meeting, dressed in the good suit I'd bought at a consignment shop. I listened to his pitch, asked intelligent questions, and learned everything I could about property development and investment strategy. Then I said no. But I kept his card. It was Mr. Hillard who told me about the title issue. I've been reviewing the estate documents, he said during one of our quarterly meetings. Something's irregular about the main house transfer. What do you mean? Your father's will stipulated that the estate would pass to Vivian upon his death. But there's a clause, one that Mr. Peterson apparently overlooked. It requires a signature of release from all direct heirs. My heart began to pound. Meaning? Meaning you, as your father's biological daughter, you needed to sign off on the transfer. Without your signature, the title is in limbo. Technically, Vivian doesn't have clear ownership. Why didn't she get my signature? Probably assumed you wouldn't contest it, or hoped you'd disappear and it wouldn't matter. But legally, she's been living in a house she doesn't technically own. I sat back, my mind racing. What can I do with this information? That depends on what you want, Eiana. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Or just to be left alone? I want to protect what's mine, I finally said. Mr. Hillard nodded. Then we'll need to file some paperwork. By the 3rd year, my compound had grown to 7 cottages, each one booked year-round. I'd expanded to offer wedding venue services and corporate retreats. The business was thriving. A luxury travel magazine reached out for a feature. I hesitated. Publicity meant exposure, but Leo convinced me. You've built something amazing, he said. Stop hiding it. The photographer came on a perfect autumn day. The leaves were golden. The light was soft, and my property looked like something from a fairy tale. The article ran with the headline, Hidden Paradise: How One Woman Built a Dream from Nothing. The photos showcased every detail: the cottages, the gardens, the main villa that I'd recently completed as my personal residence. It was beautiful. It was mine. And it included the address. I was in the garden when they arrived, 2 weeks after the magazine hit stands. I heard the car before I saw it, an expensive purr that didn't belong on my quiet road. Vivian and Derek emerged from a black Mercedes, both dressed in designer clothes that couldn't quite hide their desperation. My hands were dirty from planting. I stood slowly, brushing soil from my jeans, and waited. Vivian's face was a mask of shock, poorly concealed beneath forced warmth. Eiana, sweetheart, we've been so worried about you. Have you? It wasn't a question. Of course. When you disappeared, we thought you'd left the country. We had no idea you were so close by. She looked around at my property, her expression carefully neutral. This is quite something. Derek said nothing, his eyes moving from cottage to cottage, calculating. What do you want? I asked. Vivian's smile faltered. Can't a mother visit her stepdaughter? You told me not to show my face again, at Dad's funeral, in the rain. The silence stretched between us like barbed wire. Finally, Vivian sighed. All right, we need to talk to you about something important. May we come inside? I led them to my villa's sitting room. They both stared at the interior, the high ceilings, the tasteful furnishings, the artwork on the walls. You've done well for yourself, Derek said, and there was an edge to his voice. I've worked hard. Vivian sat on the edge of my sofa like she was afraid it might bite her. Eiana, I'm going to be direct. We're in a difficult financial situation. I waited. Derek's business venture didn't pan out, and we've accumulated some debt. The bank is threatening to foreclose on the estate. I'm sorry to hear that. We need you to sign some papers, Derek said bluntly, for the house, so we can refinance it. I almost laughed. They had no idea. Sign what papers? Transfer papers, Vivian said quickly. You know, to properly complete the inheritance process. Then we can use the house as collateral for a loan to pay off our debts. You want me to sign the house back to you? It was never yours to begin with, Derek snapped. Dad left it to Mom. Derek, Vivian warned. Then, to me, with forced sweetness. We're family, Eiana. Families help each other. I thought about the garbage bags on the lawn, the cold apartment, the grease burns from the diner, the 3 years of building myself back up from nothing. You must be mistaken, I said calmly. That house isn't mine anymore. Confusion crossed both their faces. What do you mean? Vivian asked. I mean, I'm not sure what paperwork you're talking about. As far as I know, Dad's will was executed as written. Derek stood abruptly. This is bullshit. We come here asking for help and you— Derek! Vivian grabbed his arm, her fingers white with pressure. We need her. Those 3 words hung in the air. We need her. Something in me twisted, almost like satisfaction, almost like pain. Derek jerked his arm away and headed for the door. Vivian followed but paused at the threshold. We'll see how far that little cottage of yours gets you, she said quietly, her mask slipping to show the venom beneath. If only she knew. If only she knew that the cottages were already part of an empire, that the trust she'd ignored owned more than she could imagine, that for 3 years, while she'd assumed I disappeared into obscurity, I'd been carefully, methodically, quietly reclaiming everything. But I just smiled and said nothing. The truth would reveal itself soon enough. That night, Leo came over. He'd seen Vivian and Derek's car leaving. That was them, wasn't it? Your family? Yes. How did it go? I poured 2 glasses of wine and handed him one. They want me to sign papers so they can refinance the estate. They're in debt. Are you going to help them? I thought about my father's letter, still locked in Mr. Hillard's safe. I thought about the property deeds accumulating in my name. I thought about the 3 years of rebuilding, of working until my hands bled, of learning to stand on my own. I'm going to do what's right, I said. Leo studied my face. Are you sure this is about justice, not revenge? I met his eyes. Sometimes they're the same thing. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint my garden in shades of gold. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Hillard. County records search complete. Vivian never filed the proper title transfer. Estate is still legally in probate. Your father's clause stands. You have significant leverage. I set the phone down and took a sip of wine. 3 years. They'd called me a disgrace. They'd thrown me out like garbage. They'd assumed I'd disappear, that I'd break, that I'd fade into nothing. But I'd built something from that nothing, something real, something mine. And now they needed me. Now they were begging. The trap was tightening, pieces falling into place like dominoes I'd been carefully arranging for years. I thought about the papers Mr. Hillard had prepared, about the county records, about Vivian's forged signatures on insurance documents that a forensic accountant had uncovered. I thought about power, not the kind you inherit, but the kind you learn to protect. And I thought about my father, standing in his garden, telling me that the land listens only to his blood. Eiana? Leo's voice pulled me back to the present. Where did you go just now? I smiled at him, this kind man who'd helped me rebuild when I had nothing. I was just thinking, I said, about the difference between justice and revenge. And I'm still deciding. But that was a lie. I'd already decided. The moment they'd shown up at my gate, desperate and demanding, I'd known exactly what I was going to do. I was going to finish what I'd started. I was going to take back everything. And when it was over, when they finally understood what they'd lost, I would stand in the center of my rebuilt world and let them see exactly who they'd tried to erase. 3 years. They'd remember every single one. The morning after Vivian and Derek left my property, I woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, all from Derek. We need to talk. Mom's not doing well. Please call me back. You can't just ignore us. I deleted them all and made coffee instead, standing at my kitchen window watching the sunrise paint my gardens in soft pink and gold. This view, this peace, I'd earned it. Every sunrise felt like victory. But victory, I was learning, had a strange aftertaste. Mr. Hillard called at 9 sharp. I have news. The county's forensic audit of your father's estate uncovered some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? The signature on the insurance claim filed 6 months after your father's death. It's a forgery. Your father's actual signature differs in several key characteristics. Vivian claimed $500,000 in life insurance by forging his name on updated beneficiary documents. My hand tightened around my coffee mug. That's fraud. Yes, it's also a criminal offense. The insurance company has been notified, and they're considering filing charges. What happens now? That depends on several factors. But Eiana, this changes everything. If Vivian faces criminal prosecution, you could potentially recover that money. It would legally be part of your father's estate. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, watching steam rise from my forgotten coffee. I'd wanted justice. I'd wanted them to understand what they'd done to me. But criminal charges? Prison? My phone rang again. Derek. This time, I answered. Thank God, he breathed. Eiana, please, we need to meet. It's about Mom. What about her? She's not doing well. After we left your place, she had some kind of episode. She's at Mercy Hospital. Something cold settled in my stomach. What kind of episode? The doctors say it's stress-induced. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. They're running tests. His voice cracked. Please, I know we don't deserve anything from you, but she's asking for you. I found myself driving to Mercy Hospital 3 hours later, still not entirely sure why I'd agreed to come. Leo had tried to dissuade me. You don't owe them anything, Eiana. This could be manipulation. I know. So why go? I couldn't explain it. Maybe because despite everything, Vivian was still connected to my father. Maybe because seeing her collapsed and desperate had awakened something I thought I'd buried. Or maybe I just needed to look her in the eye and understand why she'd hated me so much. The hospital smell hit me as soon as I entered. Antiseptic, and illness, and fear. Derek was waiting in the 4th-floor hallway, and he looked terrible. His expensive clothes were rumpled, his hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. She's in room 412, he said quietly. Thank you for coming. Vivian looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped rhythmically. Her perfectly styled hair was flat against the pillow, her face pale without makeup. She looked old. I'd never thought of her as old before. Her eyes opened when I entered. Eiana, Derek said you wanted to see me. She tried to sit up, winced, and fell back against the pillows. The doctors say I need to reduce stress. Apparently, my body is shutting down from anxiety. A bitter laugh. Fitting, isn't it? I pulled a chair close to the bed but didn't sit. What do you want, Vivian? I want you to know I'm sorry. The words hung between us, unexpected as lightning. Sorry for what exactly? Throwing me out? Calling me a disgrace? Stealing my inheritance? All of it. Her voice was barely a whisper. I was cruel to you, I know that now. You knew it then? Yes? She closed her eyes. I knew it then. The monitors beeped. Someone laughed down the hallway. The normal sounds of life continuing while we sat in this moment of truth. Why? I asked. The question I'd carried for 3 years. Why did you hate me so much? Vivian was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, you looked like her, your mother. Every time your father looked at you, I saw it. The way his face softened, the way he smiled. He never looked at me like that. So you punished me for existing? I punished you for being proof that I was second choice, that even with her gone, I could never be what he really wanted. She opened her eyes and they were wet. Does that make sense? No, I said honestly. It doesn't make sense at all. You could have been kind. You could have been a family. Instead, you chose cruelty. I did. The admission sat between us, heavy and final. The insurance money? I said. Did you forge his signature? Vivian's face crumpled. How did you? She stopped, swallowed hard. Yes. Why? Because Derek's business was failing. Because I was terrified of losing everything. Because I told myself I deserved it after putting up with your father's grief for 15 years. She laughed bitterly. I told myself so many things. None of them were true. I should have felt triumph. I should have felt vindication. Instead, I felt exhausted. They're going to press charges, I said. The insurance company knows. Her face went even paler. I know. Derek told me. You could go to prison. I know that too. We looked at each other. This woman who'd destroyed my life and me, the daughter who'd rebuilt from ruins. I could make it go away, I heard myself say. I could talk to the insurance company, explain that it was a misunderstanding, that you thought you had permission. I could make this disappear. Hope flared in Vivian's eyes. You would do that? I didn't say I would. I said I could. The hope died. She nodded slowly. What do you want in return? The truth. All of it. Why you really tried to cut me out completely. And I want you to leave me alone after this. No more surprise visits. No more demands. You get your freedom. I get mine. That's all? That's everything? Later that evening, I sat in my villa with Leo and Mr. Hillard, explaining my decision. You're sure about this? Mr. Hillard asked, concerned. Eiana, that woman, forged documents and stole $500,000. I know what she did. Then why protect her? I thought about my father's letter, the one Mr. Hillard had shown me months ago, the one that said, don't fight them to win, fight them to heal what they broke in you. Because I'm not doing this for her, I said finally. I'm doing it for me. I spent 3 years angry, and it built something. It built this. I gestured around at my villa, my property, my new life. But anger can't be the foundation forever. Eventually, you have to choose what kind of person you want to be. Leo reached over and squeezed my hand. That's remarkably mature. Or remarkably stupid, I said, smiling despite myself. Mr. Hillard sighed. I'll contact the insurance company. But Eiana, you need to protect yourself. Get everything in writing. Make sure they understand this is mercy, not weakness. Oh, they'll understand, I said quietly. Trust me. The media, of course, had already gotten wind of the story. My interview from the luxury magazine had sparked interest, and someone, probably a hospital staffer, had leaked news of Vivian's hospitalization and the insurance investigation. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing with interview requests. The woman who rose from ashes and exclusive. From homeless to millionaire, the estate she reclaimed. Modern Cinderella story takes dark turn. I ignored most of them, but one persistent journalist from a major publication finally got through. Her name was Maria Santos, and she had a reputation for fair, thorough reporting. Ms. Whitmore, she said when I answered, I'm not interested in scandal. I'm interested in truth. Will you talk to me? Something in her voice made me agree. We met at a coffee shop in town, neutral territory. Maria was younger than I expected, with intelligent eyes and a direct manner I appreciated. "Tell me your story," she said, setting a recorder on the table between us. "The real one." So I did. I told her about the funeral, the will being thrown out. I told her about the diner and the guest house and the slow, patient rebuilding. I told her about discovering the trust and the legal complications and Vivian's fraud. What I didn't tell her was the rage, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, the fantasies I'd had about humiliating Vivian the way she'd humiliated me. Maria listened, taking occasional notes, her expression neutral. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do now?" she asked finally. "I'm going to let it go." "The fraud charges?" "I'm going to ask the insurance company not to prosecute. I'm going to settle things privately." "That's incredibly generous given what they did to you." "It's not generous," I said. "It's strategic. I don't want to spend the next decade tangled up in their mess. I want to move forward." Some people would say they deserve to suffer. Some people would be right, I agreed. But suffering doesn't undo the past. It just creates more suffering. Maria studied me. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone angrier, someone out for blood." I smiled. I was that person for a long time. But anger is exhausting, and I've built something I don't want to lose. The article ran 2 weeks later. The headline was perfect. "Grace over grudges, how one woman chose peace over revenge." It went viral within hours, but not everyone saw it as Grace. Derek showed up at my gate 3 days after the article published, drunk and furious. "Grace," he shouted through the intercom. "You call this grace? You've ruined us. Mom's a joke. I can't show my face anywhere. And you get to play the noble victim?" I could see him on the security camera, swaying slightly, his face red. "Derek, go home. Sleep it off. You've taken everything. The house, the money, the family name. I didn't take anything. I rebuilt what you destroyed." "Bullshit. You planned this from the beginning. You wanted revenge?" "I wanted to survive," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "You threw me out with garbage bags, Derek. You called me a disgrace at my father's funeral. I wanted to eat. I wanted shelter. Revenge was a luxury I couldn't afford. And now that you can afford it?" I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. "Now I'm choosing to let you live with what you've done. That's not revenge. That's consequences." He stood there, the fight draining out of him. In the harsh security camera light, he looked younger than his 32 years, lost. "I'm sorry," he said finally, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "I'm sorry for all of it." The apology I'd waited 3 years to hear, and it felt hollow. "I know you are. Go home, Derek." He left, and I watched his car disappear down the road, wondering if sorry was ever really enough. Leo found me an hour later, sitting in my garden in the dark. "I saw the security footage," he said, settling onto the bench beside me. "Are you okay?" "I don't know what I am." He waited, patient as always. "I thought it would feel better," I said. "Winning, having them apologize, having the power." I gestured vaguely at my property. "All of this. Does it feel good?" "Sometimes, and sometimes it feels empty. Like I've won something I didn't actually want." "What do you want?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "I want to stop defining myself by what they did to me. I want this place to be about what I'm building, not what I'm reclaiming." "Then do that." "It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" He turned to face me. "Eiana, you've spent 3 years proving you're more than what they said you were. At some point, you have to believe it yourself." I looked at him, this kind, patient man who'd helped me rebuild, who'd never asked for anything in return, who saw past my anger to whatever was underneath. "When did you get so wise?" I asked. "I've always been wise. You were just too busy being angry to notice." I laughed despite myself, and it felt good. When was the last time I'd laughed without bitterness? Leo reached over and took my hand. "I'm not saying forget what happened. I'm saying stop letting it be the only thing that happened." The next morning, I called a meeting with Mr. Hillard, Derek, and Vivian's lawyer. Vivian was still in the hospital but participated via video call. "I've asked you all here to finalize things," I began, professional and calm. "I want to settle the estate issues, the insurance matter, and establish clear boundaries going forward." Derek looked nervous. Vivian, on the screen, looked resigned. Mr. Hillard laid out the paperwork. The main estate will revert to a trust structure that protects all parties. Vivian will retain lifetime residence rights, but no ownership claims. The insurance money will be placed in escrow pending a private settlement that will not involve criminal prosecution. In exchange, I said, you will sign documents agreeing to no further contact unless I initiate it. No surprise visits, no financial demands, no public statements about the family situation. That's it? Derek asked, suspicious. That's it. What about the house? The money? The house stays in trust. The insurance money will be used to clear your debts and establish a small living fund for Vivian. Anything remaining goes to charity. Vivian's voice came through the laptop speaker, weak but clear. Why are you doing this? I met her eyes on the screen. Because I'm tired. I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of you taking up space in my head. This is me choosing peace. We don't deserve this. I know. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the person I want to become. The papers were signed in silence. Derek's hand shook as he wrote his name. Vivian cried quietly on the video call. When it was done, I stood to leave. Eiana? Vivian's voice stopped me. I hope someday you can forgive me. I turned back. I don't know if I can forgive you, Vivian, but I can release you. I can stop carrying what you did to me, and maybe that's enough. 3 months passed. The media attention gradually faded. My business continued to thrive. I hired a manager to handle the day-to-day operations, freeing me to think about what came next. What came next surprised me. One evening, reviewing my finances, I realized I had more money than I needed, more property than I could use, more success than I'd ever imagined. And I remembered being homeless, desperate, working until I couldn't stand. I remembered the women at the shelter where I'd showered for 2 weeks before I could afford my apartment, the single mothers at the diner working 2 jobs, the girls who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. I called Mr. Hillard. I want to start a foundation, I said. What kind of foundation? For women starting over, women who've been disinherited, abandoned, or displaced. I want to help them the way I had to help myself, but faster, easier, with support. Over the next 6 months, I transformed 3 of my rental cottages into transitional housing. I partnered with local businesses to provide job training. I hired counselors and career coaches. The Whitmore Foundation, named after my father, not the family, opened in early spring. The first resident was a 23-year-old named Sarah, who'd been kicked out by her family for coming out as gay. She moved into Cottage 3 with nothing but a backpack and fear in her eyes. 6 months later, she had a job, savings, and plans for college. You saved my life, she told me at her going-away party. No, I said. You saved your own life. I just provided the space. But watching her leave, confident and hopeful, I felt something shift inside me. This was what I'd been building toward without knowing it. Leo and I were married that summer in the garden where I'd once made my vow of revenge. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. From vengeance to vows, he teased as we danced at the reception. Poetic justice, I agreed. Derek came to the wedding. We'd been in sporadic contact over the past months. Careful, polite, keeping our distance. He'd gotten a job at a nonprofit and seemed to be genuinely trying to rebuild his life without his mother's money. He gave me a card at the reception. Inside was a photo of me as a child with my father, one I'd thought lost forever. I found it in Mom's things, he wrote. I think Dad would want you to have it. I cried reading that note, but they were different tears than I'd shed 3 years ago. Vivian lived another 2 years. I visited her 3 times during that period, brief civil visits that never quite bridged the gap between us but acknowledged our shared history. The last time I saw her was in hospice. Cancer, the doctor said, aggressive and advanced. She looked tiny in the bed. All the fight gone out of her. I wrote you something, she said, her voice barely a whisper. She handed me a sealed envelope. Don't read it until after. After? After I'm gone. Promise me. I promised. She died 2 days later. I opened the envelope alone in my villa, sitting by the same window where I'd planned my rebuild 3 years earlier. Inside was a single page, her handwriting shaky but clear. Eiana, you were never the disgrace. I was. I took my own inadequacy and made it your burden. I looked at you and saw everything I could never be. Genuine, loved without condition, your father's true child. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that watching you rebuild, watching you choose grace when you could have chosen destruction, it taught me something. Too late for me, perhaps, but not too late for you. You asked me once why I hated you. The truth is, I never did. I hated myself, and you were the mirror that showed me my ugliness. I hope you build something beautiful with your life. I hope you forget my cruelty and remember only that you survived it. You were never second choice. You were always first. I just couldn't stand knowing it. With regret and something that might have been love, Vivian, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my father's old desk, next to the photo he'd left me and the key to the guest house that started everything. 5 years after my father's funeral, I stood at the entrance to the Whitmore Foundation's expanded campus. What had started as 3 cottages was now 12 buildings. Housing, job training centers, counseling facilities, even a small school for residents' children. A reporter asked me to do an anniversary interview, the same Maria Santos who'd written the first article about me. When you started this journey, she asked, did you imagine it would lead here? I thought about standing in the rain at my father's grave, about garbage bags on the lawn, about my hands bleeding from construction work, about the cold taste of revenge I'd savored for so long before learning it was bitter. No, I said honestly. When I started, I just wanted to survive. Then I wanted to win. It took me a long time to realize that surviving and winning weren't enough. I wanted to matter. And do you? Matter? I looked around at the campus, at the women living and learning and healing, at the garden where Leo and I had exchanged vows, at the cottage where it all began. I think I'm trying to, I said. Every day I'm trying. That evening, I walked alone through the original garden, past the guest house that had saved me, to the small memorial I'd built for my father. It was simple, a bench, a plaque, and the rose bushes my mother had planted 40 years ago, which I'd carefully transplanted and nursed back to health. The plaque read, "For those who are told they'll never own anything, build anyway." I sat on the bench as the sun set, thinking about the past 5 years, about anger and grace, about revenge and redemption, about the difference between winning and healing. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, the first foundation resident, now a college graduate working as a social worker. Just helped a girl who reminded me of who I was. Told her about you. She's coming to the foundation next week. Thank you for showing me what's possible. I smiled, typing back a response, and realized something. For 3 years, they'd called me a disgrace. But grace, the real kind, the hard kind, the kind that chooses compassion over cruelty, was the only thing I'd ever needed. It was the only thing any of us needed. I stood brushing off my jeans and walked back toward my villa where Leo was waiting with dinner. The lights from the foundation buildings glowed warm in the gathering dusk, each window a story of someone rebuilding, someone surviving, someone learning that the end of one life could be the beginning of another. I'd been thrown out with garbage bags. I'd been called a disgrace. I'd been erased. But I'd rebuilt myself, brick by patient brick. And in the rebuilding, I discovered something they could never take away. My father had been right. The land listened to his blood. And his blood ran through me, not with a thirst for vengeance, but with the strength to transform pain into purpose, cruelty into compassion, and exile into a homecoming more profound than any inheritance. I looked back one last time at the estate in the distance, the house where Vivian had lived her final years, now converted into additional foundation housing. Everything had come full circle, not through revenge, through rebirth, and that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. 10 years after my father's funeral, I received an invitation to speak at a university about entrepreneurship and resilience. I almost declined. Public speaking still made me nervous, and I preferred working quietly behind the scenes of the foundation. But then I saw the topic: building from nothing, stories of transformation. I accepted. The auditorium was packed, mostly young women, many with that familiar look of hunger and desperation I remembered from my own mirror all those years ago. I told them my story, not the sanitized version from magazine articles, but the real one: the garbage bags, the diner grease, the nights I'd cried so hard I couldn't breathe, the cold comfort of revenge fantasies, the hollow feeling of victory without peace, and then I told them about the choice I'd made to let go. During the Q&A, a young woman in the back raised her hand. "How did you know when it was time to stop fighting?" she asked, and her voice cracked on the question. "How did you know when you'd done enough?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw myself at 23, angry and lost, and so so tired. I stopped when I realized I was fighting myself more than I was fighting them, I said. I stopped when the weight of my anger became heavier than the weight of what they'd done. I stopped when I wanted to build more than I wanted to destroy. But don't they deserve to suffer? Maybe, I said. Probably. But here's what I learned. Making them suffer didn't make me whole. Building something that mattered did. After the talk, she waited until everyone else had left. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered. My family kicked me out last month. I've been sleeping in my car. I pulled out a business card for the foundation. Come tomorrow, I said. Bring whatever you have. We'll figure out the rest together? She started crying, and I hugged her. This stranger who was also me, who was also every woman who'd ever been told she was worthless and had to learn her worth alone. Thank you, she sobbed. Thank yourself, I said. You're the one who's surviving. I'm just providing the space. That night, I sat in my garden. Older now, the original rose bushes mature and spreading, new plants added each year, and thought about my father. If he could see me now, would he be proud? I thought he would. Not because I'd won, not because I'd reclaimed the estate or built a successful business or proved Vivian wrong, but because I'd learned that the strongest foundation isn't built on anger or revenge or even justice. It's built on grace, the kind of grace that says, you hurt me, and I survived. The kind that says, you tried to break me, and I built something beautiful from the pieces. The kind that says, I'm done carrying you, and I'm moving forward without you. For 3 years, they'd called me a disgrace. But grace, real grace, was learning that their words had only ever had as much power as I gave them. And I was done giving them power. I was done being defined by what they'd done to me. I was finally, fully, completely free. And freedom, I discovered, was the only inheritance that truly mattered. When someone takes everything from you, do you rebuild yourself to find peace? Or do you rebuild yourself to show them exactly what they lost? If this story made you think about the thin line between justice and revenge, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about families, forgiveness, and the power of rising from the ashes.